Tensions in the Persian Gulf are absolutely boiling over. So if the US were to actually put boots on the ground in Iran, what would that invasion look like? Well, today, we're going to crack open the Pentagon's playbook and look at 4 very different strategies they're likely considering. The situation over there is escalating, and it's escalating fast. What began with targeted airstrikes now seems to be morphing into something much, much bigger. The very real possibility of a full-scale ground campaign against Iran. And let me be clear, this isn't just talk. We're talking more than 6,000 elite U.S. troops reportedly on their way. And these aren't just any troops. You've got Marine Expeditionary Units, the experts in amphibious landings, and paratroopers from the legendary 82nd Airborne. From a military strategist point of view, these aren't just reinforcements. No, they're the tip of the spear. So this huge deployment really brings up a critical question. An invasion isn't just one move. It's a whole series of strategic decisions. So what are the actual options on the table? What are the targets? And what are the ultimate goals? All right, let's dive right into that playbook. We're going to walk through the 4 main strategies that military analysts think are being weighed. And then we'll talk about something called the decisive moment, which could tie this whole thing together. So first up is a strategy that isn't really about marching on the capital, Tehran. Nope. This one is a precise strike aimed right at Iran's economic jugular. It's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. You know, just the world's most vital choke point for oil. See, Iran has effectively put a stranglehold on the strait. And remember, 20% of the entire world's oil flows through that narrow waterway. They've done it pretty cleverly, not with a big traditional navy, but with what's called an asymmetric strategy, a mix of drones, swarms of fast boats, and really well-hidden coastal missile batteries. So, how do you counter that? Well, the idea is to use land forces to solve a problem at sea. It would likely involve Marines landing on the coast to take out those missile and drone sites, plus an airborne assault on one very particular, very important island. And that island's name is Kesh. Now, if you looked at it on a map, you'd think, military target? No way. It's actually a popular tourist spot. In fact, Iran even tried to get it listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's famous for its incredible natural beauty, these amazing salt caves and mangrove forests. And that peaceful, beautiful image? Well, that's what makes it the perfect cover. Because hidden beneath that idyllic surface is a massive military secret. We're talking up to 1,600 feet underground. Iran has built this huge network of tunnels, basically a missile city that's stockpiled with the exact anti-ship weapons they're using to enforce the blockade. Seize this one island, and you pretty much cripple that entire strategy. Okay, let's shift gears to option 2, which is a totally different way of thinking. It's a much more surgical approach. Instead of capturing territory, this strategy is all about small, targeted missions by special forces. As former Israeli defense official Ehud Elam describes it, the focus here is all on precision. You know, go in, destroy a radar site, knock out a key facility, and maybe even capture some high-ranking leaders to use as bargaining chips. And the US has shown it can do this stuff. Just look at the successful extraction of Venezuela's former president. But from a purely strategic point of view, you have to ask, is it worth it here? With Iran's supreme leader already gone and its leadership in chaos, how much real leverage would grabbing another official get you? It's a fair question. Now for our third option. This one zeroes in on the single most critical spot for Iran's entire economy, the place that funds its military and everything else, a tiny little place called Harg Island. The strategic value of this island is just staggering. Get this, 90% of Iran's oil exports, the absolute lifeblood of the regime, flows through this one little island. So the logic is simple. You seize Karg Island, you effectively turn off the money tap for the entire regime. And tactically, it seems pretty doable. Joseph Vodal, a former head of U.S. Central Command, that's CENTCOM, he estimates that a pretty small force, maybe a battalion of 800 to 1,000 troops, could probably pull it off. But, and this is a big but, here's the strategic catch. Taking the island is one thing. Holding it, that's a whole different ballgame. Karg is only 20 miles off the Iranian coast. It's basically a sitting duck for constant attack. For a military planner, trying to resupply troops there would be an absolute logistical nightmare. Okay, this brings us to option 4, and it is by far the most daring, most high-risk strategy of them all. This plan would send U.S. forces deep, and I mean deep, into Iran to go after the regime's ultimate insurance policy, its stockpile of enriched uranium. The target is very specific. 440.9 kilograms, that's nearly 1,000 pounds, of uranium that's been enriched to 60% purity. And to put that into perspective for you, that is just one short technical step away from being weapons-grade material. And you can imagine, this would be an incredibly complex and dangerous operation. It would take a large force, maybe 1,000 to 4,000 troops, to push hundreds of miles inland to secure sites like Natanz. Then, they'd have to hold those positions for days against counterattacks, while specialized teams work to package and get that nuclear material out safely. A huge gamble. Okay, so we've just laid out four very, very different ways a ground operation could go down. So what's the big picture here? What does this playbook really tell us about the strategy? Well, when you lay them all out side by side like this, you start to see a clear pattern. Each of these strategies is designed to dismantle a different pillar of Iranian power. You either break the blockade to hit their navy, use surgical strikes to mess with their command, choke the economy to cut off their funding, or go for the nuclear gambit to take away their ultimate threat. But there's another really fascinating layer to all this. According to experts like Doran Kempel, a former Israeli Special Forces commander, the true goal might actually be much bigger than any one military objective. The idea is that any of these ground operations could provide the spark, what he calls the decisive moment, that convinces people inside Iran's own military to finally turn on the regime. And that, right there, leaves us with a final, really provocative question. Could it be that the ultimate goal of a U.S. ground invasion isn't what the American military does itself, but what its actions inspire others inside Iran to do? The real target might not be an island or a bunker, but the very foundation of the regime itself.